Hi, my name is JC.
And my name is Juan. Welcome to The Couch, a podcast where real therapists talk about real things.
Please remember that we are therapists, but we are not your therapists, and this podcast is intended for educational purposes only.
Hmm, educational purposes. We are in episode 4, cuatro, of season 2. And in this episode, you and I are going to go into kind of continuing that process of the structure of the season, right? So the season focusing a lot on relationships. So for this episode, we're going to dive in, um, and not, for just for clarity, not an extensive amount where you're going to get everything here, but I think enough where you're going to be able to pull away some key points, maybe some pointers that you could potentially apply or work with a counselor near you and apply with them, focused on a foundation to quote unquote here a happy, long lasting marriage.
That's the goal anyway, right? Those beautiful, happy, long lasting marriages. And something that we would like for you to keep in mind as we're recording this podcast is if you don't hear the exact structure of your marriage or the exact structure of your relationship while we talk about those prescriptives of a happy romantic relationship, it does not mean that the way that you and your partner are doing life is invalid. We're just using a very brief and broad overview for some things that contribute to overall happiness. Just want to put that disclaimer in there.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you did. And, that's a great place. Good a place as any to start when it comes to this foundation. And we're using the word marriage, but it could be different for you. You've got your relationship with significant other, whether that's singular or plural, and really it's your space, right? Your space that we're here for the podcast just for purposes, not jumping around to using a lot of different terms to highlight one similar area. We'll stick to whether it's relationship or marriage. I like to look at it as, and this may be a bit odd, I like to look at it as whether you're playing a board game or you're playing a sport, right?
Hmm.
So when you think about a board game, you know that there's rules, there's structure. Same goes when you're playing a sport. Certain amount of players on the field for baseball. We know what happens
Mm-hmm.
when someone hits it over the fence or it was a foul ball. We know a certain amount of pitches leads to a strikeout. And what that mentality, that mindset does is in connection here to a long, happy, long lasting marriage is it gives you a little bit of space to think about your foundation. And does it have those rules? Does it have that structure? When there's a lack of structure, it can create hurdles. It can create challenges and barriers. A simple example of that would be if you're in a relationship and maybe from your end you feel that there's this expectation that you are maybe you're going to be the provider, and your
Mm-hmm.
partner on the other hand, for years you've both been arguing a lot about that. They want to be more independent. They want to work. They want to put the hustle out there.
Mm-hmm.
So this, you're bumping heads on it, and sometimes it may be due to that you skip over that process, that you skip over sitting down and looking at what are the rules here, what's the structure here, what are the expectations, so that you both know what that role looks like within this space. And it's an ever changing space, but at least to some degree, we want to know it early on.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that you'd mentioned specifically was like the rules of engagement, if you would, or like the rules of a relationship. And I think that oftentimes people use the relationships that they've seen as the guideline and the litmus. And the
Mm,
reality is that not everybody had access to healthy looking relationships or healthy relationships growing up. So when they do start to struggle in their marriage, they start to see it as a personal failing. I am incapable of having a healthy relationship. And something that can contribute to those healthy and long lasting relationships is recognizing that you're not going to be good at something you've never done before, and recognizing that relationship health is very subjective, and
Yeah.
you have to be willing to understand the subjectivity of relationships generally, especially with something like marriage. It's defined in like a couple of different spaces. So let's define it in the legal sense, holy matrimony, the church sense, or the religious sense. It can be a business arrangement for some people. It can be all sorts of stuff. And it's up to
Yeah.
you to decide how that looks.
Yeah. No, that's wonderful. And I think what it does is when you're building this foundation, it gives you this aha moment to kind of look at ownership and think about, okay, I'm starting to understand what the rules and what the expectations are. And I do agree with what you said. I think a lot of times we go into a relationship and you look at and you're like, okay, why do I date this way? Why do I date my spouse this way? Or why do I expect blank? And it may come
Hmm.
from those um, childhood experiences. Maybe you saw your parents and that's how they behaved with each other. So it's really
Hmm.
important to kind of slow down and redefine that space and think about, what do you want to create? What do you want to create with your partner? What do those roles look like? Um, within this space too, and this, I think there's different pioneers here that coined this work. When we're looking at creating a healthy and lasting marriage, it's important to look at that term happy and really think about it from like a spider web diagram. You put happy in the middle, stick out little lines. Maybe you've got fulfillment, excitement, curiosity, passion, adventure, all of these little items on there that are really important to you. So see how you can implement that within that foundation, within those layers.
Mm. Defining your own happiness is something I think that people get afraid to do when it comes to marriage or relationships in general. I
Yeah.
think, we have a such a static view of what happiness in a relationship looks like. And it can be the honestly, it can be like the determining factor in whether or not you're able to sustain. Something I think about a lot is people are able to whether or not people are able to understand the roles of their partnership or the roles in their relationship. You
hmm
know, is your oh, my partner is my best friend. Beautiful, wonderful. But what happens if they're not? What happens
Yeah.
if you have another best friend already? What happens if there's somebody else who gets to take that type of role in your life? Does it mean that you're not happy with your partner, or does it just mean that you have a different type of friendship?
Yeah. That's a wonderful point there, looking at um, the foundation of a happy, long-lasting marriage. It's extremely vital that ample amount of that work is on an individual level. That you look at ownership. It's a wonderful book, I believe, by a Navy SEAL that I think is titled Ownership, and it really just speaks a lot of, taking that position of empowerment and looking at, all right, if I want, and I'm raising my hand, I'm saying I want a healthy, long-lasting relationship without any of my partner's help. What can I do on my own?
Mm,
And that's where it goes into, I think a lot of that you're sharing, where it's okay, my partner can't be everything for me. Um, and how can I still give love maybe during moments of turbulence? How
mm,
can
mhm,
I work on myself, my mental health, my self-care? And a lot of that, what it does is it's like this really beautiful gift you give your partner because they're able to see that, you're okay, that, you're able to self-sustain. And that takes a lot of pressure off of them, knowing
mhm,
that you can, move yourself and maneuver yourself through different situations just as a quick little plug here, there's another book I read years ago when I first got into working with couples. This one I'm forgetting the title, but it spoke a lot on, which to a degree, I'm not sure how accurate this is. It reminded me of our clinical journey, JC, as counselors.
Hmm.
I don't know if you remember during grad school, it's pretty pushed upon us to do a lot of individual work, right? Like try to get to
Oh
your
yeah,
whole self.
definitely.
Don't work with a patient if you feel that you've got a bunch of things going on. And I think to a degree that's extremely challenging because life is going to keep throwing curveballs at you.
Hmm.
So if you wait forever, you may not work with anybody. But we get in the big picture, if you definitely got something heavy, deal with that before you move forward. So this book, what it did was it really pushed this notion of, before you enter that stage of your relationship, maybe the stage of like seriously dating where it's marriage, if we're using that term,
Hmm.
ensure that you've worked on yourself, that you're going into this relationship knowing that you're contributing versus taking, right? You're
Mm.
going into the relationship with the mindset of, I'm here to, if I'm a highlighter, highlight my partner versus I'm going in because I'm lacking, I'm lacking maybe someone that can validate me, that can, push me to, you know, deal with this and that. When in reality, those are items that you on your own or maybe through some support want to address.
I really love the way that you phrased that, and something that I have talked about multiple times with clients quite literally all across the developmental space, like teens and adults, and even like people who are in their older adult years, is what the purpose of a relationship is. And that relationships are not utilitarian, like they're not tools to use in order to go into a relationship putting your best foot forward. I think it's really important that you consider why you want to be in a relationship and also what you want to share in a relationship. If you go into this relationship with the expectation that this person's going to make you whole, the expectation that this person is going to fix all of your problems, you are already setting yourself up for failure, because that's not the purpose of relationships that are not like transactional in nature, or relationships that are built on this foundation of like codependency. I need this person to make me feel better. Oh, this person inspires me to do better. They can inspire you, yes, but you have to have some sort of self motivation. And in the space of marriage, it can be really difficult to admit when there are things that you need to work on your own, because we see marriage in a lot of cases as this space in which you are not allowed to do things by yourself. It's exclusionary, it's disrespectful to your partner. And the reality of the situation is that there are going to be things you have to do by yourself. And when you step into a long term committed relationship with that understanding, you give yourself and your partner so much space and grace to grow with one another and not just growing for the sake of each other. And I think
Mm,
that can be really hard to conceptualize for some people.
it is, yeah. Yeah, you kind of have to just take a moment and pause and really think about, what's happening in this space. I think maybe adding to it, right? Adding to going into a relationship where you're contributing, going into a relationship where you're thinking about your role. I find that it's really helpful when we're trying to create this happy, long lasting marriage. A component of it is making it, really, mandating is, I'm putting a strong word on there, that
Hmm.
it's a space where you continue to find yourself, versus losing yourself. And I used the word continuing to find yourself, because that's life, right? We have new experiences, year after year, and as we have these experiences, we learn more about our individual self and our collective self. So if you're in this relationship, you kind of close your eyes and you think about a space where you get to learn more about who you are. You get to be curious. You get to enjoy your growth and have this person that, applauds it and loves that. versus a space where you're in it for whether it's months or years, and then you look in the mirror and you no longer know who this person is. You're very disconnected
Mm,
from that version of you that once made you smile. And
mm,
you can conceptualize that and really think on it. And I think for most, as they hear that, we lean towards the direction of, okay, I definitely don't want to be in a space where I lose myself.
mm. As you were talking about this concept of like losing yourself, I think of
Eminem.
the you gotta lose yourself on the low. Only a little bit did I think of Eminem. But I also think of um like the unfulfillment that people kind of associate with marriage sometimes. The idea of marriage being a duty or a chore. And I wonder, this is kind of like just a secondary question for you. I know that a lot of your work involves couples, and I wonder, how do you navigate those cultural messages of like marriage is a duty or marriage is forever, and even if you're not having a good time, you just have to stay married, and that's just the end of the story. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it ties in here. I'll use the term cultural humility. So,
Hmm.
if you're not familiar with that, it's where, in a very basic way, you hold humility. Like you allow yourself to remove bias and judgment, and you're sitting down with somebody and you say, "Tell me about you. Teach me who you are." So, in a cultural context, if me, Juan, uh, Latino male, brown, I'm sitting across somebody. I may ask them, what is it like for you to work with a male? What is it like for you to work with a Latino male, immigrant male? Right? Those kind of questions, and I'm trying to learn. So I take a very similar approach when working with couples and trying to identify, what is it that you're looking for here? Like, what is your version of a successful relationship? And often that conversation ties right back to like this individual level, which is quite beautiful, where a person's able to come back almost like to their soul, and they think about these are just statements that may hear. They go, well, I want to be seen, and I just want somebody to take time out of their day to ask me how I'm doing. And I don't need to know exactly where this person is on all hours of the day, but check in on me, maybe ask me how I'm doing. And you start to kind of decipher through those words, and you're learning that the person wants to be seen, they want to be heard, they want to feel that they're contributing to something, they want to be part of a team, and they're defining it, which gives it so much more power. It empowers that individual as they're defining it, and I think for them, they're then able to vocalize that to one another. And then it becomes this dance of, here's what I'm highlighting, here's what you're highlighting. How can we come together in that? And when they're doing it and it's effective, it's harmony. Sometimes, of course, we can hold our pain in a manner that that restricts us and blocks us from dancing. So that's definitely
Mm,
a challenge there. And if I'll go on a quick side note here, it takes me to the next area that I think is really important in relationships, and it's the ability for couples to become experts. And I use that word not lightly, experts at repairing their relationship.
mm-hmm.
There's some research connected to Gottman, which is there's a lot of different um, mental health clinicians, psychologists, therapists that do research in different areas. So his and his wife are in that area um, doing work, and they highlight I think it was like 68 or 69, somewhere around that percentage. Problems are perpetual, where they're not solved. Maybe personality differences, things like that. And that's
Mm-hmm.
always been fascinating to me from the context of you're in a successful relationship, yet you're raising your hand and you're saying, yeah, it's a lot of problems we haven't solved. Right? It's quite
Mm-hmm.
fascinating to know that you can be in a your definition healthy, successful relationship, and there's many problems you haven't solved, many issues you haven't solved, And as a fun activity, if you're listening to this and you're in a relationship, think about that. Think about how many problems, issues in your relationship that did not reach a solution, right? And
Hmm.
I bet there's a good amount that did not reach a solution. And what I pulled from that is that when couples get really great at repairs, they're not necessarily looking to solve an issue. They're more looking for this like really humanistic space of, I just want you to listen to me. I just want
Mm-hmm.
you to give me energy. And it takes me to the next term, which is really important here, and it's time. Time is something that it's hard to put a number on it. It's one of those
Mm-hmm.
variables that, as soon as it's gone, it's gone. So when couples get really great at repairs and addressing these issues, that means that they're able to give each other time and talk and listen and validate and empathize and highlight compassion and respect. And having that skill, once again, becoming experts at repairs, that's a element that I strongly encourage you to have in your relationship and be great at it.
Mm. I think that concept of repairing a relationship kind of scares people because there's kind of a finality that conflict has in relationships that a lot of people aren't willing to acknowledge. And I think in marriage, it's doubly so that because people see conflict in a marriage as failure, right? Like people see it as, oh, well, we're just not good at this. We're not good enough. We're not doing enough to like make each other happy, to make things better, to work better for one another. And I think that kind of, cha cha slides back to the point of like, you know, marriage tends to be, not tends to be, that is not correct, but marriage can sometimes be something that people see as a duty. And it kind of sucks the joy out of what this union could be. And knowing that you can make all the repairs in the world and some problems won't get fixed, that sounds more discouraging than it actually is, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Right. So you think about that and you go, okay, so here's a relationship and there's going to be problems that we don't solve. And that sounds and it feels discouraging. So you kind of go into a deeper layer and you think about, well, what are the problems? How significant are they? And typically you'll find that there's like this deviation between the ones that are really significant and the ones that have more to do with an issue, but beneath the issue, right? Beneath the iceberg. What we're really talking about is, I want more time together. What we're really
Mm-hmm.
talking about is, I want to go shopping, for the kids together.
Mm-hmm.
So there's typically something beneath that layer, and the issue itself is just that loudness that's creating chaos. But beneath the chaos, that's the elements of connection that sometimes people have a hard time getting to. So that takes us to another pillar of a healthy relationship, and it's knowing, kind of highlighting that again, knowing that not all problems are going to be solved, and being able to communicate, which is sometimes such a, I think, an area that's like, well, I know how to communicate. I'm communicating right now, and
It's
it's
like, are you communicating? Or are you yelling at each other? Like,
yeah,
what's really going on?
exactly. And, I think if I didn't have this job, this career, there's a lot of messages growing up as a kid where, I was like, okay, I'm communicating, words are coming out of my mouth. Is that
Mm-hmm.
who was that? Chris Rock?
Yeah, do you hear the words that are coming out of my
Yeah.
mouth? I think
So,
it is. I think
yeah.
it
So I
is.
was, I was definitely doing that. And I think like, most skills, whether it's communication or karate, there's a lot of hidden elements within it. So, becoming an expert at trying to be open to this process of learning how to communicate. And that means that you may not be an expert right away, but allow yourself to try. And try means that you listen. You you speak in a manner where you want to be heard.
Speak in a manner that you want to be heard. That's probably a sermon. That's probably a sermon somewhere with somebody.
Those are some of my favorite words. I tell my kids that, and sometimes they'll repeat it before I even say it.
Oh,
If you,
what they'll say?
yeah, they're like, I
Will they be
know.
arguing and you'll be like, "Hey,
Yep, and then they'll jump in. They'll be like, it's either that or they'll hear me. Another one that I say at home a lot is comparison is the thief of joy. And they'll go, I know comparison is the thief of joy. Now shut your mouth.
listen, having a therapist for a parent might be like the best and worst thing in the world. Maybe,
Yeah, yeah. I
possibly,
certainly agree with that.
maybe. We'll interview the kids next episode and see how they feel about it.
See how that
Um,
goes.
yeah, but as we're talking about marriage, I think it could be something that people can be getting bogged down with is we're talking about the hard work, right? We're talking about how difficult it can be to keep, maintain, sustain, repair a happy, long lasting relationship. Um, but I kind of want to scoot us over to highlighting the possibilities inside of a marriage and the possibilities that you get to share with somebody else. Ultimately, the main goal in any relationship that you have, familial, romantic, platonic, workplace, friendships, any of those things, it should be for it to be comfortable, happy, enjoyable. And as long as you're willing to put in the work to get that out, you can only get out what you put in, right? Much like a bank account. And I
Mm,
don't want people listening to this be like, damn, y'all don't make it sound fun to be in a long lasting relationship. I promise that it is. What we're trying to do as we tell you about the things that are foundational to happy relationships and specifically happy marriages is we're encouraging you to take an inventory of what you see in your relationships now, an inventory of what you see in your marriage today, and see how those things line up. When's the last time you had a conversation with your spouse about the values that you share? When's the last time you had a conversation with your spouse about the things that you enjoy about one another? That
mm,
I think you called it that culture of curiosity, getting to know somebody regardless of how long you guys have been together.
yeah,
that that's the fun stuff, right? You can learn something new and wonderful every day about your partner if you pay attention, if you're willing to have those conversations. It simply it only stands to add more to your relationship.
yeah. And I mean, that's a wonderful place there to close up, for today. With it, I'll add 2 cents.
Mhm.
There's a quote on this, right? When you look at things worth fighting for,
Mm.
so kind of keeping that in mind. It's also very rare that you find yourself in a space that it's worth the squeeze, but it comes, easy. And there's lots of good quotes. Boy, Steve
Yeah,
Harvey.
the juice being worth the
You
squeeze,
have
I
that
believe
one.
is the quote.
That's a good one there. Or what does Steve Harvey say? If you're uncomfortable, that means you're growing. Something like that.
Is that what Steve Harvey says? Because I'm more used to him saying survey says, a la Family Feud.
Oh goodness.
I
I
don't
used to
think I've
let me say
heard a.
Steve Harvey back in the day when he had hair. I would always go, man, that hairline is just perfect.
Oh my God, not the hairline. Is that what you aspire to in your older ages?
That's what I aspire to in my older age. Yeah.
I love this for you. Now, let me tell you something. If I see you walk into the office with the Steve Harvey hairline, I will have to leave for the day because I will be inconsolable, just to remind you,
That's
just to
understandable. That's
let you know.
understandable.
Not as understandable.
All right, so let's see. Let's give people their personal growth challenge. You want to go first or second?
I'll go second this time.
Okay. So with this topic of a foundation, a long lasting marriage, here's a growth challenge. Let me think on it just for a second, because there's so many areas here you could really touch on, but we'll keep it very simple. Try to have this um, daily ritual that you do, daily act that you do, where you're trying to give your partner and give yourself acts of kindness, and you're shooting for a high number like 5, 10, 15, or more, and it's consistent. Every day you're doing 5, 10, 15 things kind to yourself, and then you're tossing some of those to your partner. That's it.
That's very cute. That's very good. My personal growth challenge is for those of us who are aspiring to marriage. So maybe you're in a long term relationship, maybe you're engaged. If you are aspiring to marriage, I would like for you to do a little bit of future journaling and write a letter to yourself as a spouse. What sort of things do you want to embody? What sort of things do you want to prepare for in the future, and what sort of things do you want to contribute to your relationship in the future, or in your marriage rather?
I like that. And let's see, coming up for next episode, we are going to go into, which again touches on this topic of relationships, but it's a self love, focused on building that key relationship with yourself, which is not always as easy as it's thrown out there on TikTok and all those other videos.
That's ooh, what a doozy. It's going to be a fun time.
Looking forward to it. All right, y'all have a great rest of the day. We will catch you next time.
See ya.